Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and a warm greeting to those who are listening to this presentation. My team and I was assigned by Cik Puan Maizatul Saadia Muhammad of University Technology Mara Campus Alagaca to discuss on the topic of the macroeconomic problems of Indonesia. Faris Izzuddin, Muhammad Kafiz Aiman and Nur Aina Yasmin was tasked to gather the informations and facts, and Damia Madiha was tasked to prepare and edit both the magazine and the video.
Introduction of the country. Indonesia is the world's largest archipelago. It is a country in Southeast Asia and Oceania between the Indian and Pacific Oceans. It consists of more than 17,000 islands including Sumatra, Java, Borneo, Kalimantan, Sulawesi and Papua New Guinea. This strategic position has always influenced the cultural, social, political and economic life of the country, which gained independence from the Netherlands in 1949. Indonesia is the largest island nation in the world and the 14th largest land-based country. Indonesia's population is over 267 million, the fourth most populous country in the world, as well as the most populous Muslim majority country.
Unemployment occurs when people who are above a specific age are willing and able to work but unable to find a suitable job. A number of people in the workforce who want to work but unable to get a job, usually measured by the number of unemployment rate, which is dividing the number of unemployed people by the total number of people in the workforce. Unemployment serves as one of the indicators of an economy status. In 2013, there were 23.94% large-scale industry companies in Indonesia. However, the number of companies in Indonesia is not enough to accommodate and reduce the unemployment rate. The number of young unemployed and jobless graduates in Indonesia is increasing. Indonesia faces structural unemployment and seasonal unemployment. The statistics show the unemployment rate in Indonesia from 1997 to 2020. In 2020, the unemployment rate in Indonesia was at approximately 4.84%. From the statistical table, we can conclude that from 1997, the unemployment rate is increasing and decreased in the year of 2000. Then it remained constant in 2002. In 2003, the unemployment rate started to increase again until 2005 and decreased for 0.39% for the next year and increased 0.51% in 2007. Started in 2007 until 2015, unemployment rate started to decrease until to its lowest point, that is 4.05% in 2014, and started to fluctuate until 2020. The ideal of unemployment rate for Indonesia is 4.9% until 5.7%. Zero unemployment wouldn't be ideal, almost impossible. It is because it would indicate a severely overheating economy. Lots of impact that appear because of unemployment in Indonesia, all in individual effect, economic effect, and social effect. For individual effect, if unemployment in Indonesia happens a long period, individuals will lose their job skill, causing a loss in human capital. For economic effect, unemployment in Indonesia can lead to decrease in economic activities. Decline in purchasing power will cause a decline in the demands for goods and services. Last but not least, for social effects, the absence of income causes the unemployed in Indonesia have to reduce their consumption expenditure. This will cause the increasing variety of criminal offences in Indonesia.
There are three ways on how to overcome the unemployment in Indonesia. First is to set up training centers. To aid in overcoming structural unemployment, the Indonesian government can set up training centers to retrain their workers so they can increase their qualifications for finding a job in new industries. The quality of local human capital can be improved through improved education and healthcare as well. Second is for workers to move. They can also encourage workers to move to other regions and industries where jobs are available. For example, they can move from rural areas to urban areas to find jobs. Therefore, the attainment of full employment is a significant economic objective of governments in many countries, including Indonesia. Third is matching seasonal industries. The solution for seasonal unemployment is to have matching seasonal industries that can share the labor force. More jobs can be created through diversification and integration of the economy in agriculture, tourism, and other services sectors.
Inflation is the rate at which the general level of price for goods and services is rising and consequently the purchasing power of currency is falling. Inflation is classified into three types: demand pull inflation, cost push inflation, and monetary inflation. The most commonly used inflation index are the Consumer Price Index (CPI) including Indonesia. Inflation is an increase in the general average price level of goods and services in the economy and depends on the consumer price index. Cost push inflation occurs when the aggregate supply is decreasing. It happens in the short terms or increased price factor of production like land, labor, capital, and raw material. Usually it occurs in an elastic item. Many cases of cost push inflation can happen in Indonesia, such as increased wages, import price, exhaustion of natural resources or natural disaster, fall in exchange rates, government regulation or taxation in increase in supplier profit. Demand pull inflation occurs when the aggregate demand is more than the aggregate supply in a fully employed economy. For Indonesia, they experience demand pull inflation because of the large number of citizens in the country. According to the statistic in Indonesia from 1997 to 2020, it is ranked as the fourth most populated country in the world. Monetary inflation occurs when the money supply is decreasing or through expansionary fiscal policy and through expansionary monetary policy. Hyperinflation is usually caused by an increase in the extraordinary money supply. However, in exceptional circumstances such as a trap of liquidity, it is possible to increase the money supply without causing inflation. This is because in a recession, an increase in the money supply may only be stalled. From the statistical table, we can conclude that from 1997, the inflation rate is decreasing and increased in year 1998. In 1999, inflation rate started decrease until early 2000 and increased until 2002. It decreases from 2003 for 2 years and started increase until 2006. The inflation rates in year 2007 decreased -6.70%, then increased in 2008 for 1 year and decreased -5.84% in year 2009. Started in year 2010, it's increased until 2011, then decreased in 2012 and increased 2.13% for the next year. In 2014 until 2016, the inflation rates decreased and increased 0.28% for 1 year. Started in 2018, inflation rate started decrease until to the lowest point, that is 2.7% until now.
Impact of inflation. The main factors that causes inflation rate in Indonesia are fluctuation of fuel prices, growth of money supply, and growth of gross domestic product. As we know, Indonesia is one of the developing countries that economy condition tends to go up and down, which is also called fluctuation that caused by domestic and global effect. As we can see, the Indonesian economy threatened the cause of high inflation, value of rupiah in term of dollar is depreciated, and growth of money supply is increased. As we know, inflation is all prices of goods or services increase generally. Inflation creates many problems such as lower purchasing power, high cost of production, high unemployment rate. Other determinant of inflation in Indonesia is fuel prices, which occurred in 2005, which creates high inflation rate. Price of goods or services is expensive, increase production costs, so many industries reducing their production as a result, certain industries reducing their labor, thereby causes unemployment. How to overcome inflation? There are four ways on how to overcome inflation. The first one, raising the interest rate. The central bank will direct the commercial banks to raise their interest rates for deposits from the public. The high interest rates will encourage the public to save more and increase the savings level to decrease the aggregate demand and price level. The second one, control of money supply. Monetarists argue there is a close link between the money supply and inflation, therefore controlling money supply can control inflation. The third one, fiscal policy. A high rate of income tax could reduce spending, demand and inflationary pressures. The last one is supply side policies. Policies to increase the competitiveness and efficiency of the economy, putting downward pressure on long-term costs.
A recession is a macroeconomic term that refers to a significant decline in general economic activity in a designated region. It has been typically recognized as 2 consecutive quarters of economic decline, as reflected by GDP in conjunction with monthly indicators such as a rise in unemployment. A recession is a period of economic contraction where business see less demand and begin to lose money. To cut costs and stem losses, companies begin laying off workers, generating highest level of unemployment. During the third quarter of 2020, the Indonesian economy entered a recession. The Statistical Agency of Indonesia (BPS) reported that gross domestic product (GDP) growth in quarter 3 of 2020 contracted by 3.49% year-on-year, making it the second consecutive quarter of negative growth. The key explanation why the economy has crashed in the second and third quarter of 2020 is the self-imposed social and market constraints introduced by the Indonesian government in an effort to deter the further spread of COVID-19. It is a trend that is taking place not only in Indonesia but around the world.
Recession in Indonesia. Indonesia fell into recession for the first time in 2 decades as the coronavirus pandemic took its toll on Southeast Asia's largest economy. The country's real gross domestic product plunged 3.49% in the 3 months ended September from a year earlier, according to data released. The slowdown follows a 5.32% contraction in the previous quarter, plunging the archipelago into a recession, defined as 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth. This is the first time Indonesia's economy has experienced consecutive contraction since the Asian financial crisis in the late 1990s. Household consumption, which makes up over half of Indonesia's GDP, shrunk 4.04% year-on-year after a steeper 5.52% fall in the previous quarter. On a quarterly basis, Indonesia's GDP grew 5.05% in the July-September period, recovering from a 4.19% contraction. How Indonesia overcome recession. President Joko Widodo's administration has sought to prop up the economy by easing taxes and spending more on social support and public health. The government approved a relief package worth 677.2 trillion rupiah in June to revive the virus-battered economy. That was bigger than the 641.17 trillion rupiah initially allocated in late April, but slow disbursement and outbreaks of the coronavirus are hindering a recovery.
To achieve fiscal sustainability, this ensures that the nation, both now and in the future, is in position to settle its debt in an orderly way without resorting to extraordinary measures. A falling trend in a debt to GDP ratio is a clear indicator of sustainability. Such as a result allows the pace of economic growth to surpass the actual rate of interest. The cost of running a fiscal surplus rises without this requirement. First, to be more appealing to investors. Second, to inform the markets about the capacity of the government to meet its debt servicing burden in an orderly manner. Third, interest rates will continue to stay high. And the last one is higher interest rates place heavy pressure on the economy. An economic indicator is a piece of economic data that economists use to view existing or potential investment prospects typically on a macroeconomic scale. This indicator also helps to determine an economic well-being. First, GDP growth rate. Second, GDP annual growth rate. Third, unemployment rate. Fourth, inflation rate. And the last one is interest rate.
There are four measurements taken by government to overcome inflation. First, maintaining volatile food inflation in the range of 4.0 plus minus 1% through efforts to strengthening the four pillars of strategy, which includes price affordability, supply availability, smooth distribution, and effective communication. Maintaining supply and smooth distribution, especially ahead of the national religious holidays. Strengthening agricultural institutions accompanied by capacity building, financing, and development of digital agricultural ecosystems. Second is increasing the effectiveness of social protection programs and the distribution of targeted subsidies in order to maintain the people's purchasing power. Third, strengthening communication synergies to support the management of public expectations. Fourth, strengthening the coordination of central and regional governments in controlling inflation through the National Coordination Meeting on Inflation Control in June 2020. Measurement taken by government to overcome unemployment. The government of Indonesia had the ambition to reduce Indonesia's unemployment rate to about 5.7% in 2014. This ambition was pronounced by Armida Alias Chavana, the Minister of National Development Planning. According to the latest data released by Statistics Indonesia, the country's unemployment rate currently stands at 5.92%. The minister stressed that the unemployment target of 6% that was set in Indonesia's National Medium-Term Development Plan is to be reached in 2014 and has already been achieved. As a conclusion, unemployment, inflation, and recessions are the macroeconomic problems that happens in not only Indonesia or Southeast Asia countries, but in every single country in the world. The only difference for each country is the types of problems that happens, the impacts, and the measurement taken by each government to overcome these problems. A great system can allow a country to face these challenges faster and in a more efficient way, with a little amount of impact towards the economy. To summarize this discussion, the macroeconomic problems of Indonesia, such as unemployment, inflation, and recession, has their own perspective types, impacts on the economy and country, as well as their own perspectives way to overcome it. The government of Indonesia has done its own initiatives and actions to overcome these problems, as well as still continuing to come with more ways to face these challenges. For the future outlook, these macroeconomic problems will be the problems that the government and citizens of Indonesia will always have to overcome. With the advances of technologies and the increase in sector of the industries, these challenges can be overcome in an easier way in the future. That marked the end of this discussion. My team and I hope that all the information that has been gathered and discussed is enough to educate you on the macroeconomic problems that is happening in Indonesia. We thank you for listening to our presentation patiently and attentively.